Reynolds felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. His entire career, his entire identity was hanging in the balance. He could fight this. He could deny everything, push back, walk away. Or he could face the truth. A long silence stretched between them. Then finally, Reynolds took a slow breath, his hands unclenched. And in that moment, he made his choice. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, a voice cut through the air. "Officer Reynolds." They all turned. Standing on the sidewalk was the young man from the photo, the same one Reynolds had stopped months ago. And the look on his face said everything. The story wasn't over yet. Reynolds felt his chest tighten as he locked eyes with the young man. He looked different now, not just older, but more sure of himself. There was no fear in his stance this time, only quiet recognition. The street felt eerily still as everyone waited for what would happen next. The captain turned to the young man and gave a small nod. "I asked him to come," he said, glancing at Reynolds. "I thought you should meet him again, under different circumstances." Reynolds' throat felt dry. He wanted to say something, but what could he say? Sorry, didn't mean to, none of it felt like enough. The young man took a step forward. "Do you even remember me?" His voice was calm, but there was something behind it, something that told Reynolds that Stop had stayed with him for a long time. Reynolds swallowed hard. He did remember. Not just the stop, but the way the kid had looked at him, confused, scared, unsure why he was being treated like a suspect. "I remember," Reynolds said, his voice lower than he expected. The young man studied him and nodded. "That night, I went home and told my dad what happened. You know what he said?" He let the words hang before answering his own question. He said, "You met one of the bad ones tonight. But not all of them are like that." He tilted his head. I wasn't sure if he was right. Reynolds felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't ignore anymore. Monroe crossed her arms. "So, Officer Reynolds, what now?" The question wasn't just about this moment. It was about everything. About who he was before today and who he would be after. Reynolds let out a slow breath. He thought about the badge on his chest, what it was supposed to mean. Then he looked at the young man again. "I don't know if I can fix what happened that night," he admitted, "but I can make sure it doesn't happen again." The captain gave a small nod, as if that was the only answer he had been waiting for. The young man studied Reynolds for a moment longer, then simply said, "I hope so." And with that, he turned and walked away. Reynolds stood there, watching him go, knowing he would never forget this moment. He had spent years believing he was doing the right thing, but today had changed everything. And now, it was up to him to decide what kind of officer he would be tomorrow. 2 years. The captain nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "And in those 2 years, how many times have you pulled someone over because you had an feeling?" Reynolds hesitated. He knew the truth, but saying it out loud was different. I don't know." The captain nodded again, as if he expected that answer. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Let me ask you something, Reynolds. If I were a white man, dressed the same way, driving the same car, would we be standing here right now?" Reynolds' stomach tightened. His mouth felt dry. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to believe that. But deep down, something told him the truth wasn't so simple. A radio crackled in the patrol car, but neither of them moved. Across the street, an older woman peered out from behind her curtain, watching them. Reynolds knew how this looked. He knew what people would assume. The captain followed his gaze, then shook his head. "This moment, right here, this is why people don't trust us." His words were sharp, but not cruel. Just honest. You ever think about that? Reynolds clenched his jaw. He had thought about it, but not like this. Not with himself in the middle of it. The captain sighed again, rubbing his temple like a man who had dealt with this too many times before. "You got a choice, Reynolds. You can walk away from this and pretend it never happened. Or," he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Or you can learn from it. Reynolds swallowed hard. What do you mean? The captain studied him for a long moment. I'm not filing a report. Not yet, but that doesn't mean this is over. Reynolds' heart pounded. He should have felt relieved, but instead, a new kind of fear settled in, because now he wasn't just facing a mistake, he was facing the truth. And the truth had a way of changing everything. Reynolds felt his pulse hammering in his ears. His instincts told him to walk away, to nod and say, "Yes, sir," and put this behind him. But the captain's stare held him in place. There was something about the way he said asterisk, "This isn't over asterisk." It wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. A voice crackled over the radio again, snapping Reynolds out of his thoughts. His partner was checking in. He glanced at his car, tempted to respond, to shift the moment away from the tension pressing down on him. But the captain wasn't giving him an escape. He stood firm, waiting. Then the captain did something Reynolds didn't expect. He pulled out his phone and started dialing. Reynolds felt his stomach drop. Who was he calling? His superior? Internal affairs? His heart pounded as he fought the urge to stop him. But when the captain finally spoke into the phone, his words caught Reynolds off guard. "Yeah, it's me," he said. "I need you to come down here, now." Reynolds frowned, confused. The captain wasn't reporting him. He was calling someone in. But who? Minutes passed, dragging painfully slow. The air between them grew heavier. Reynolds shifted on his feet, trying to shake the unease growing inside him. The captain just stood there, arms crossed, unreadable. Then a car pulled up. Not a patrol car, but a sleek black sedan. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a sharp suit, moving with a kind of confidence that made Reynolds feel even smaller. Reynolds stiffened. He recognized him immediately. Asterisk, asterisk, Deputy Chief Sanders, asterisk, asterisk, one of the highest-ranking officers in the department. His throat went dry. This wasn't just a lesson anymore. This was something bigger. The deputy chief walked straight to the captain and shook his hand. Then he turned, eyes locking onto Reynolds with an expression that sent a chill down his spine. "You must be Reynolds," Sanders said, his voice calm but firm. "I hear we need to have a conversation." Reynolds didn't dare move. His mind raced with possibilities. Was this the end of his career? A formal reprimand? Worse. The captain finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying more weight than any shouting ever could. "This is the part where you decide what kind of officer you really want to be." Reynolds swallowed hard, realizing there was no turning back now. Whatever was about to happen next, asterisk, it was going to change everything asterisk. Reynolds' hands felt clammy as he stood there, trapped between the captain and the deputy chief. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, like they were peeling back every layer of who he thought he was. The street around them seemed to shrink, the noise of passing cars fading into the background. Deputy Chief Sanders took a step closer. "Tell me, Officer Reynolds," he said, his voice measured, "if we pulled the body cam footage from this stop, would it match the story you'd write in your report?" It was supposed to be a routine traffic stop, the kind that happens every day. But what unfolded on that quiet street would leave everyone involved stunned. A young white police officer, full of confidence but blind to his own assumptions, spotted a sleek black SUV cruising through the neighborhood. Something about it didn't sit right with him. Maybe it was the tinted windows. Maybe it was the driver, a middle-aged black man dressed casually. Whatever the reason, he flicked on his lights and pulled the car over. As he stepped out, his heart pounded with adrenaline. He had done this 100 times before, and today was no different, or so he thought. With a firm voice, he barked commands. License and registration. The driver calmly complied, reaching for his wallet. But the officer wasn't interested in small talk. He was focused, convinced he had the upper hand. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. The driver hesitated for a moment, then sighed, unbuckled his seatbelt, and did as he was told. He knew exactly where this was going. Standing face to face now, the officer's tone turned sharp. He questioned the man like a suspect, his words laced with assumptions. But then something shifted. The driver, patient yet unwavering, reached into his back pocket and pulled out something unexpected: his badge. Not just any badge, a captain's badge. The young officer's face paled, his confidence crumbled. The very man he had been treating like a criminal was not only a fellow officer, but outranked him by miles. And that's when everything changed. What happened next left the officer speechless, and the captain with a choice that could alter both of their lives forever. Stay tuned, because what unfolds from here is nothing short of shocking. The street was silent, except for the sound of the officer's heavy breathing. His mind raced as he stared at the badge in the man's hand. It wasn't fake. It wasn't some cheap replica. It was real. And the words on it made his stomach drop. Asterisk, asterisk, police captain, asterisk, asterisk. The captain held his gaze, his expression unreadable. He had been in law enforcement long enough to recognize that look in the young officer's eyes: fear, embarrassment, and something else. A realization creeping in, slow but undeniable. The officer swallowed hard, his grip tightening on his belt. He fumbled for words, his confidence slipping away. Just moments ago, he had been in control. Now he was standing in front of a superior officer, realizing he had crossed a line. The captain let out a slow breath. "What's your name, officer?" His tone was calm, but there was weight behind it. "Oh, Officer Reynolds, sir," the young cop stammered. "Officer Reynolds," the captain repeated, nodding slightly. "Do you know why you pulled me over?" Reynolds shifted on his feet. He knew what he wanted to say, but suddenly, everything he thought made sense didn't anymore. Was it really just the car, the tinted windows, or was it something else he didn't want to admit? I thought there might be suspicious activity," he muttered. The captain raised an eyebrow. "Suspicious how?" The question hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. Reynolds had no good answer. His training told him to trust his instincts, but now those instincts were being challenged. A car passed by slowly, the driver glancing at them before continuing down the street. The captain noticed it. He knew what it looked like: a white officer stopping a black man, voices tense, body language stiff. He had seen scenes like this play out too many times, and he never thought he'd be in one himself. Reynolds cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Sir, maybe we should just forget this happened." But the captain shook his head. "No, Officer Reynolds, we're not just going to forget this." And in that moment, Reynolds knew this was far from over. The street felt colder now, even though the sun still hung in the sky. Officer Reynolds shifted uncomfortably, his fingers twitching at his side. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, making it harder to breathe. The captain, standing calm and composed, studied him, not with anger, but with something even more unsettling: disappointment. "Walk me through it," the captain said, his voice steady. "What exactly made you think I was suspicious?" Reynolds opened his mouth, then closed it. He had reasons, didn't he? The car, the neighborhood, the way the driver looked. But now, under the captain's gaze, every justification felt flimsy. His mind scrambled for something to say, but nothing sounded right. The silence stretched. The captain finally sighed and put his badge away, but his eyes never left Reynolds. "How long have you been on the force?" 2 years, sir," Reynolds answered quickly, as if the response might somehow redeem him. He drove home with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near his holster. Every shadow in his rearview mirror felt like a threat. Every car that slowed behind him made his pulse spike. He couldn't be sure if he was being paranoid or if someone really was watching. That was the worst part. He had no way of knowing. By the time he pulled into his driveway, exhaustion had settled deep into his bones. He stepped out of his car, glancing once more down the empty street. Nothing, just silence. But as he approached his front door, he saw it. A small black envelope, sitting neatly on his welcome mat. No markings, no name, just like before. Walker swallowed hard, his fingers hesitating before picking it up. He opened it slowly, heart pounding in his ears. Inside was a single piece of paper, just a few words typed. Asterisk, asterisk, he should have let it go, asterisk, asterisk. Walker clenched his jaw, the note crumpling in his fist. He looked around again, scanning the darkness, but there was nothing. No footsteps, no movement, just the eerie stillness of the night. He stepped inside, locking the door behind him. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Maybe it never would be. But one thing was certain, his life had just changed forever. And somewhere out there, Michael Carter was still watching.